What's up? I don't normally film outside. The weather's been getting nice. I guess I'll just jump into it. I can't really think of a lighthearted way to put this. On the 20th of February, on a Thursday, I suffered from a primary spontaneous pneumothorax. If you guys don't know what that means, pneumothorax is a hole in the lung, more often known as a collapsed lung. Primary means I don't have any pre-existing lung conditions or health conditions for that matter. And spontaneous, as the name implies, is it happened for no reason. Nothing happened. Whenever people think of a collapsed lung, they think of the movies, right? Some guy got shot, fist fight, they were in a car crash. In a more realistic scenario, somebody fell down the stairs. In the Canadian context, maybe I was shoveling, exerting myself. But for me, I was quite literally walking down the street and it happened. For no reason whatsoever. Before I go on any further, I'll quickly clarify that right now I'm doing better, much better. It's been quite a road to recovery. I wanted to record this video for two reasons. Number one, I guess bringing more awareness to it doesn't hurt. I think it's pretty cool how incredible the human body is, but also on the other end of it, just how fragile we are, right? Kind of sucks. And then the other part of it is I haven't edited a video in a while. And so I think this will give me a bit of material to work with. I don't know if you guys follow me on Twitter, but I posted a little joke where I incorrectly voted for every candidate in the Canadian provincial election. All you need to know is you're not supposed to do that. Wherever the photos on the screen is, you're not supposed to vote for every candidate. You're supposed to vote for one candidate. I will also say that is not my photo, and I did not do that. That is someone else's photo, allegedly. After I had left the voting area, I started suffering from symptoms of what I thought was a heart attack. I've been a lifeguard for a couple of years. I was trained in first aid. So I was immediately able to point out a lot of the symptoms, in my opinion, was a heart attack. I was feeling a very heavy pressure on the left side of my chest where the heart is. I was having difficulty breathing. My left arm was in a lot of pain. And I was one or two symptoms short from just being like 100% this is a heart attack. If I got something like I wasn't able to see anymore properly, or I was dizzy, or the pain just got worse, I would have been 100% sure. But I was slightly unsure. But it was also because that night I had a flight out of Canada to Taiwan, a 14-hour flight. Obviously, the worst thing that could happen is you have a health issue and you have to cancel the whole trip. That's probably the second worst thing. The worst thing would be to have that health issue while on the trip. So I was walking home. I was like very hyper aware of like, if this gets worse, I'm going to walk into a restaurant. I'm going to ask somebody to call 911 for me. But it didn't get worse. It kind of just stabilized. And I just kind of thought, well, I was going to get on the bus to go home, but there's a hospital on the way to my house. I got off the bus and I walked into the hospital. And I was like, listen, I think I'm having a heart attack. Like, what do I got to do? And they were like, well, please pull a ticket and then we'll attend to you shortly. So that always makes you feel good. I think one of the big overlapping themes that I've always known, but I guess I've now lived through, is that if the doctors are not immediately attending to you, then that means there's probably somebody worse off than you. Now, that's slightly exaggerated. I only had to wait for like 1 or 2 minutes after I pulled my ticket before they started, checking my vitals and all that. It took about 1 to 2 hours. But for the entire time I was being monitored and I was going through a bunch of tests. They drew my blood. They did like electro scans, x-rays. Eventually, a doctor was able to see me and I guess saw all of the information, and they said, well, good news, you are not having a heart attack. And I'm like, okay, awesome. Maybe I'm having some weird back pain. I'll take some like painkillers, some Advil. I'll get on that 14-hour flight and I'll just kind of brute force it. Bad news. Your lung collapsed and you are not allowed to leave the hospital. Yes, it is what it is. Not only was I not allowed to leave the hospital, they had to immediately operate on me. It wasn't severe per se, but it wasn't small enough or unimportant enough where they could just leave it. There are some levels of the amount of your lung can collapse where you can actually just go home and just wait it out, and your lung can heal and just kind of go back to normal. But in my case, nope, they had to do an operation on me. So immediately I texted my family, I texted my friends, and I texted my girlfriend's family because they helped me with the booking of that trip to Taiwan that I had mentioned prior, to cancel everything because I wasn't gonna make it anymore, unfortunately. And that night they did an operation on me where basically they inserted a tube into the left side of my chest. I guess I didn't explain why they needed to insert that tube. So in pneumothorax, what happens is the lung gets a hole for one reason or another, whether it's because, as mentioned, you get a gunshot wound, somebody punched you really hard, or in my case, it was spontaneous. There are these things on your lungs that can form, and they're called, I believe, blebs. And basically, it's just, I guess, some weird pimple or fold in the tissue that just pops or rips. That's it. What happens is the air from your lung starts escaping into your body. But because your body is obviously a completely closed system, there's nowhere for that air to go. And so what happens is the air that starts getting stuck inside your body, and in turn, there's not enough space inside your body for your lungs to expand. So essentially, that air starts crushing your own lungs. And that's where the suffocation and the chest pain feelings come from. That tube that they are inserting into my chest, the entire purpose of it is to give that air a waft out of my chest. After that operation, they said, we're going to leave the tube in your chest. I believe they call it a pigtail. And you have to come back in 48 hours and we'll see how you're doing. And if everything is good, we'll pull out the tube, call it a day, you'll heal at home, and all will be good. Sounds good, doctor. I don't know any freaking better. Turns out, I did not get better. Before I go onwards, there's two little fun facts that I guess I kind of want to highlight. The first one is, how does a lung collapse for no reason? There are a couple, I guess you could say, characteristics of the people that suffer from spontaneous pneumothoraxes. Number one, if you have a pre-existing health or lung condition, you're immediately at a higher risk. I don't. Number two, if you have had a pneumothorax or a collapsed lung in the past, you're immediately at a higher risk of having one again. I have never had one before. Number three, if you smoke excessively every day, you're addicted to cigarettes, you smoke weed every day if you're in a place where it's legal, obviously very unhealthy. Do not vape, do not smoke, all right? Your lungs. You only get one of those, unless you get a transplant, but those are very long, so don't bank on those. I don't smoke, I don't vape. But then there's point number 4. If you're a tall, skinny male between the ages of 20 and 40, you have a disproportionately higher risk of having a spontaneous pneumothorax. That's me, baby. I hit the jackpot. Apparently, according to statistics, this happens to about 1 in 10,000 men, whereas for women, it's 1 in 100,000. The second fun fact is, as I mentioned, I was going to go on a flight. Had I ignored the pain that I was feeling, because honestly, it was very uncomfortable, but I could have managed it. But also there was that uncertainty of what if it gets worse, right? I don't know what I'm having right now. Had for whatever reason, I decided to completely ignore all of that and say, I cannot miss this flight. I've spent thousands of dollars on the accommodations, on the flights, on the entire experience, getting that paid time off. I could have died on that flight. Eventually you learn is that one of the most dangerous things for pneumothoraxes is changes in air pressure, which is why I am not allowed to scuba dive for the rest of my life. I've never done it before. I thought it'd be cool to do it one day. Now I'm a little sad that I'm going to miss out on that experience. It is what it is. That also does mean, however, eventually I will be able to fly again. But flying is a risk. If I ever have to pay for travel insurance, I'm going to have to pay more because they have operated on my lungs. I cannot skydive. Skydiving, off the books. I've wanted to skydive, not anymore. Apparently, I can do artificial skydiving because there's no change in air pressure. So maybe that'd be cool. I need to talk to my doctor about that. But at least that'll be my way of coping of never being able to skydive. Climbing tall mountains. I never really planned on climbing Mount Everest, Kilimanjaro, but I really wanted to climb Mount Fuji. So I don't know if I can do that anymore. It's a maybe. We'll have to see. Anyways, back to the story at hand. I was sent home. For about 24 hours afterwards, my condition was stable and slightly improving. The only instructions I had, take it easy, don't carry anything heavier than 10 pounds, and sleep sitting upright. If I sleep lying down or on my side, not only might it be uncomfortable, but it might trap the air, or it might trap the air from escaping my body, essentially making the situation worse. I have not slept lying down since February 20th. I have been sleeping sitting up every single day, including till now. This Saturday morning/afternoon, my condition started to deteriorate to a point where I was once again struggling to breathe and the pain was coming back. I was also suffering from migraines, but I don't know if that's related to the pneumothorax or if that was just my body suffering. I never get headaches. That was probably like the second or third time in my life I've ever gotten a headache, which already probably sounds like an anomaly to some people. Anyways, it was so bad that I had to call an ambulance to take me back to the hospital. First time I've ever ridden on an ambulance, so that's cool, I guess. I wish I wasn't suffering because I could not breathe, I could not speak. Holy cow, this video is gonna take effort. Holy cow. They readmitted me back into the hospital. My pneumothorax got worse. The lung collapsed even farther. And then I heard some pretty concerning things from the doctors, that being, why did they let me go? Why did the previous doctor let me go? There's different procedures at different hospitals. I guess the doctors of other opinions, for the most part, generally felt like I shouldn't have left. That definitely made me feel better. That is sarcasm. The long story short is they had to re-operate on me. This time they had to pull out the tube and put an even bigger tube. Not only did they put a bigger tube in me, they had to hook me up to a med gas suction outlet, which essentially was sucking the air out and whatever liquids were inside of me. The reason that there are now liquids is because obviously when they operate on you, there's bleeding, and there's probably also fluids that they put either to like disinfect or whatever. Now I've got tons of like blood also being flushed out of the chest. At that point, I was not allowed to leave the hospital, and it was a waiting game. Will I get better, or did they need to escalate my care? Long story short, did not get better. I had to be transferred to a different hospital with more dedicated facilities and with a team of doctors and surgeons that are specifically trained with operations on the lungs. Because unfortunately my lung, I guess, had been through quite a bit, just could not heal itself anymore. I needed a bit of help. In a perfect world, the initial operation and then the monitoring afterwards would take about 3 days. If I didn't get better, they would recommend that I'd get transferred to a different hospital, or they would do their own assessment before operating on me again, and then do again another 72-hour period of monitoring. Unfortunately, it took about almost 3 weeks from the initial collapse of my lung to the discharge of the second hospital to be discharged, I guess, for lack of better words. Unfortunately, a lot of people need healthcare. And I guess not as unfortunately, I know that's a double negative. I was in stable condition. That is a good thing. I was not dying. I was occasionally struggling, but for the most part, I was as capable and operating as best as I could under the circumstances, which meant if I'm doing fine, there are a lot of other emergency operations that need to occur before I can be taken, let alone waiting for the operation, waiting for the transfer. I had to wait an entire week at the hospital after they had decided they could not help me anymore. and that I needed a higher level of care. So that's definitely slightly demoralizing, knowing that I need a higher level of care, but also not knowing when I was gonna get it, which meant I spent a lot of time at the hospital. I had a couple other trials and tribulations along the way, but eventually I was transferred to the second hospital. Before I was transferred, my hospital called 3 different ambulances because they didn't have the correct equipment to safely transfer me. Eventually, the doctor had to be like, actually, I don't need that equipment and you're just gonna raw dog it. What that means is I had to go without suction, and if they unplug me from that suction, my lung would immediately recollapse and I would no longer feel like I could breathe. And I was like, well, I guess I gotta do that if I want higher care, right? That was the longest 3 hours of my life, not being able to breathe very great. That sucked, but I made it to the second hospital. At that point, they reassessed me. They were like, yup, you're kind of screwed, buddy. You need an operation. The name of that operation, a mechanical VATS bullectomy. VATS meaning it's like video assisted, and then I'll put the rest of the name on screen. A bullectomy meaning they are going to cut out a part of my lung, and then what they're gonna do is they're going to essentially glue my lung to the skin around my lung as like a makeshift band-aid. Mechanical is in reference to how they glue my lung to the skin. Mechanical essentially means they'll irritate, or I guess scratch or whatever, the skin around the hole of where they cut out my lung, and then essentially push it up against the skin. The other version of this operation is a chemical VATS bullectomy, where they would use something like, I believe, talc or something like that. I don't know what the chemicals they use. Had they done chemical and they needed to operate on me in the future, say this happens again, or there's a different surgery that is around my chest, there is a higher risk just because they did it chemically or something like that. I'm not too sure. So very shortly after I was admitted into the second hospital, they all essentially agreed I needed this operation. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, I no longer had to wait to go into the hospital. I was at the hospital. I had a surgery bed, but now I had a lineup for when I would get my surgery. And that was essentially another week of waiting. And again, I'm very fortunate in that I was in stable condition. I could breathe as best as I could. I was eating entire meals. I could walk, but I was always connected to an IV as well as to the suction, so I couldn't really go anywhere beyond like 1 meter around my bed. But what that meant is as long as there were other people before me and as long as people were admitted to the hospital for emergency operations, obviously more life-threatening than mine, I had to wait. That was all I could do. Eventually, it was my turn. They operated on me, and fortunately, I had no issues whatsoever, except for one, which is that they found a bunch of dried blood in my chest cavity. That took them by surprise because it wasn't displaying in the x-rays, but also, as I had repeated multiple times, this was a pneumothorax or collapsed lung that happened for no reason, which means there was no reason for there to be blood in my chest. As for how that got there, they don't know, and I don't know. The only running theory is that because they put a chest tube in me, and that tube was inside me for essentially 2 weeks, probably irritated the insides, and I was bleeding at one point or another. But eventually, I was awoken from the surgery, and I was back to square one of my recovery. Practicing breathing, learning how to manage myself, and then after that 72-hour period, the doctors gave a thumbs up. I am stable enough to be discharged and to go home, and now it is all up to me to manage my own recovery. Today is Friday, I think March 15th. I was discharged from the hospital. When was I discharged? Last Sunday? Maybe like 5 days ago, 6 days ago. And so far, fortunately, hopefully I'm not jinxing it, it's all been uphill from here. Slowly regaining my ability to breathe. Slowly getting my stamina back. But unfortunately, once I fully recover, assuming all things go well, this is not the end of the journey. This is, in fact, I guess you could say, a new chapter of my life. A couple, I think, funny things before I move on to that. I had not showered for 3 weeks. So that was definitely a huge life experience. Who would have thought if you don't shower, you're kind of smelly? But I was able to essentially bathe myself with disposable towels. Not the same, all right? Next time you have a shower, really enjoy it, all right? I also want to give some huge hospital tips, all right? Hopefully you guys never have to do these tips, but if any of y'all ever end up being in a hospital for a long-term period, or you know somebody that's in a hospital for a long-term period, maybe some of these will be helpful. Number one, all right, I'm so thankful that I thought of this, but my family, God bless them, they were visiting me every single day. They were always asking me if I wanted anything. Ask somebody to bring you an extension cord. Plug that bad boy in, run the extension cord all the way to your bed. You're good. You're hooked onto that power. You're chilling. Number two, this is a tip that I've heard a lot of people say ever since COVID, which is kind of just being able to designate where your living spaces are.
I made sure that before I had an office, I would take my laptop and I would sit somewhere in the room that was only for work. Not for watching TV, not for eating food, only for work. I put myself into a mindset that I need to be in an area of my house that is designated for that mindset.
The reason this got popularized in COVID is essentially when people were working from home or studying from home. That's where you end up unable to relax when you're playing video games because all you can do is think about work, or being unable to focus on work because all you can do is think about relaxing. A very common example as well is you should avoid going to bed with your phone, leaving your phone outside. The bed should only be for sleeping, stuff like that. Anyways, the reason I bring all of this up is that if you are not mentally prepared to be in the same area for weeks at a time, it can very easily become like extremely bad for your mental health. I'm very fortunate in that I have a very strong support group, and also I think mentally I'm pretty well contained, I'd like to think. I'm gonna put a couple photos on the screen, but basically as y'all can see, at the entire time I was at both hospitals, I was restricted to that bed and about a 1 meter radius around that bed. Suddenly being restricted to like a couple square feet is a very large lifestyle change that I think people oftentimes take for granted. I'll oftentimes joke, some of y'all may have heard of this, I don't have a door on my bedroom, on my own personal bedroom. So when I was in the hospital, the nurses never closed the door. And I never really felt like I lost privacy because I never really had it to begin with. I also would constantly have a roommate. That was also something else that I kind of had to get used to. So just being on good terms with your roommate is good. But to go back to the previous point, to kind of keep myself mentally sane and in check, I would only do specific things in specific areas around my bed. For example, in my bed, I would only sleep and I would do any health-related things in that bed. So if a nurse needed to check my vitals or if I needed to do an x-ray, I would do it in that bed. And that's it. If I wanted to do some sort of exercise, I would stand to the left of my bed. I would do stretches, I would practice my breathing, all while standing on the left side of my bed. If I wanted to relax, essentially have my living room, if I was having visitors, I would sit to the right side of my bed. And I think having those barriers, even if it's as something as silly or as minuscule, as I mentioned, specifically only doing stretches in one specific spot beside your bed, it kind of really helped with setting the mindset. When I knew I wanted to exercise, I would stand up and I was mentally ready. I've taken the effort to stand up and do these exercises. I am now going to do exercises. Or if I decided I've done enough exercises and I want to relax, I would not get back in bed. I would make the effort to walk around the bed to go to my living room. Similarly, if I wanted to go on my phone, I would only go to that living room. Very rarely was I on my phone and in bed. For nearly the entire time I was in the hospital, I could not sleep for more than 2 hours at a time. So what would happen is I would sleep for 2 hours. I would wake up for one reason or another. Once I would wake up, I'd be like, well, I can't sleep. I would stand up, start doing stretches. I would go to my living room, sit down for half an hour, scroll on my phone. And then I'd be like, okay, I'm ready to try to sleep again. And I'd go back to bed. And that was essentially my lifestyle routine. I think that is probably the most important tip that I can give to people. If you're asking for water, ask for 2 at a time. Ask for 2 cups of water at a time. The nurses can get pretty busy, and you never know when they're gonna make a comeback. I would ask for 2 cups of water. I would drink 1, and then ask for 2 cups of water, and then I'd have 3 cups of water. I would drink my water. Once I get down to 1 cup, I would ask for 2 cups of water, just so I always had water. Another thing that I really wish I knew, I don't know if this is standard in other countries, but this is, I believe, Canadian law, or at least Canadian medical practice. Some hospitals will have students that are learning, maybe doing a co-op or an apprenticeship. If you are ever uncomfortable with a student performing a medical task on you, you can decline and ask for an actual doctor or nurse to do it for you. I was unfortunately at the hands of a student that verbally said that they were inserting an IV for the first time in me. I would have said no had I known, but also I was kind of going through my own trauma of being freshly shipped into the hospital from an ambulance. And let me tell you, that hurt. That IV, worst IV I've ever had. I would definitely let a student, put an IV, draw my blood, do my vitals if I was in a much better mental state. But in that moment, I was in emergency. I was brought in on an ambulance. I should not have let a student do that to me. But it is what it is. Didn't know my rights back then. We live, we learn. Something that I learned is that hospitals will oftentimes have a social worker that they've also hired. So if you ever need to submit government paperwork, they can help you out. In my case, I didn't know we had a social worker until I'd already done all of it by myself. But it's obviously good to know. This is a tip that I've heard from a ton of people, and I don't like it, but I feel like it's one of those necessary evils, which is that sometimes you just have to say that your pain is worse than what it actually is. If you're not literally screaming and saying that your pain is a 10, they're not going to do anything about it. There were very few instances where that was the case for me. However, there were also times where, for example, they were putting the blood pressure sleeve on me, and I was like, hey, like, this is too tight. Like, I'm feeling a pinching sensation. And they're like, no, that's normal. That's normal. It's supposed to feel tight. Which I get what they're saying, right? The blood pressure sleeve is supposed to measure your blood pressure. It is supposed to tighten up. That wasn't until they removed the blood pressure sleeve from me. There was bruising along my entire arm, I guess. Anyways, let's hop a bit back to the future. I've since been discharged from the hospital. I am now recovering from home. Currently, I am experiencing 0 pain, which is huge. I have not been on any painkillers for the past couple days. And at the moment, the only discomfort that I'm having is if anybody touches my chest, that hurts. It hurts, not a lot. So usually just don't touch me. You shouldn't touch anybody, but don't touch me, please. You can't really see it, I think. But my left wrist is yellow. And that is because apparently they had to put a tube in my wrist during the operation to monitor vitals. That is normal. But what that does mean is that, for a lack of better words, my wrist has suffered some form of trauma. And it is still healing from that. So it is very sore. My glasses keep fogging. Screw it. No glasses. Breathing wise, I'm kind of getting back there. I can talk. I can speak in full sentences. I can maintain conversations. But I would say half of the time, I cannot get a full breath. And that's definitely frustrating. If you guys have ever, maybe after a workout, just felt like you just could not quite get a full breath. But I'm not even working out and I can't do that. So that's been a bit of a struggle. But I think marginally my breathing capacity is getting better. I've been exercising to some degree, going for walks, which is really good. I have not tried running. I think if I tried running, I would collapse probably. I'm having full meals. And I haven't really been on the computer at all, which I guess is a good thing. Like, I've been on my laptop. I've had to call the Canadian government and my work to figure out insurance and medical leave and all that. But I think the long story short is I am improving, and we'll have to see where that goes from here. I guess that brings us to this next chapter in my life. What was I talking about? So in the near future, my road to recovery is about 4 to 6 weeks. 2 days after I left the hospital, I was able to remove the gauze from my body and take my first shower. I took 2 showers in the same day and I still felt dirty. But after the 3rd shower the day after, I was like, okay, I'm kind of normal now. Let me tell you, your hair will get oily. That was fun, I guess. Also, removing all of the glue residue from my body took like 4 days. Removing it during a shower, huge tip. Otherwise, just very patiently rubbing it all off is, I would say, a good tip. The faster you can get the glue off of your body, the earlier I was able to sleep at least a little bit better. 2 weeks after I've been discharged, I need to go to a hospital or a walk-in clinic to get some stitches removed. And then 4 weeks or 1 month after I've been discharged, I need to go back to the hospital and they're going to do a checkup on me to make sure that I'm recovering as best as I can. After 6 weeks, assuming everything is fine and I have no complications, they're hoping that I can go back to some form of normalcy. I'll be able to pick up heavier things, kind of work my way up back with probably some physiotherapy or just going to the gym. I wasn't going to the gym and I'd like to though, so that's probably a huge thing I got to be doing soon. But as I mentioned, there are things that I cannot do and things that I have to be careful about doing. Now, shortly before I was discharged, I asked a bunch of questions. I think some of them were a bit silly, but worth asking because they're kind of funny, I guess. The big number one question, what if I suddenly ate a bunch of food and got fat? Will that lower my chances of it happening again? The answer is no, I'm screwed. So no point in suddenly not becoming skinny or normal or average. I guess if you are currently larger or heavier than average, for your own health, you've got an argument to stay that way. Speak to your doctor. I'm not a medical professional. One of the things I've been thinking about is how I will probably need to be a little bit more picky on what flights I take, only because I don't really know if my lungs will get weaker if I take a lot of flights. I was kind of averaging 2 to 3 flights a year round trip. A couple of them that y'all might have recalled is that I went to Los Angeles twice last year, simply for a weekend. I think maybe if I'm only going for a weekend, it's an amount of stress on my lungs that is probably unnecessary. So I might have to reconsider stuff like that. I might also finally have a more motivated reason to get a car, and maybe I'll drive to the States instead of flying if the location is close. That's something I guess I'll have to consider. One of the big things that I've kind of been very hesitant about, because there isn't enough research on this, but I did see a couple papers that implied some correlation between being at very loud concerts and festivals and the vibration of the music causing an irritation to the lungs. So if I got to start avoiding those as well, my music career is kind of cooked, I guess, for lack of better words. Last year, I was wanting to make a video kind of recapping the last 13 years of my online creative career and seeing what kind of next steps I was looking into. I didn't end up doing it last year. I didn't make the video last year because I had a very specific way that I wanted to shoot the video. And I decided, well, I'll do it next year when the weather gets better. And now this now sudden health complication has kind of brought a new lens in regards to what I want to do moving forward. I can still be a bedroom producer and doing music stuff, but now the ceiling is a lot shorter. So I'm not really sure what's next in that regard. I guess to be a little more lighthearted, 2 years ago I went to Lost Lands, and one of my big complaints was that they had the smoke machines pointed at the crowd, and that they had so much smoke in the machines that my sinuses and my snot were pure black. So now for health reasons, I will not be attending Lost Lands ever again. Sorry, Excision. Not sorry. And yeah, I don't know. I'm just taking this one day at a time. I guess to leave this on some sort of note, my mom, when she was talking to me the other day, was talking about how, usually when life kind of throws stuff at you like this, that it could maybe be the universe trying to give you some sort of life lesson. And she was saying how, like, maybe for some of our family members, it was that, family sticks together. For me, my only life lesson that I could really pull from this is, I guess, just I'm not invincible, which I guess is a good life lesson. Kind of reminds you that you're human. Anything can happen for any reason, and it's not always your fault. Sometimes you're just unlucky. It is what it is. I've been looking into a lot of communities with other people that have suffered the condition that I did, and I've seen some people like expressing not hatred, jealousy, envy. I don't really know what the correct word is, but obviously there's that element of like, man, look at those people smoking all the time, and they're not having any lung conditions. Why do I gotta have that? I don't really feel that way, which I guess is part of the whole having a good like mental state and grounding. The only reason I brought that up is just kind of the whole, sometimes the universe is funny. That's all I can really say, Sometimes it just really do be like that. The only other next steps for me is that I've had such a tumultuous experience. Obviously from having a lung collapse for no reason, but also because I've had so many issues with the hospital that initially admitted me. I've had some people advise me that I could sue for medical malpractice. I don't really know if that's something I will do, only because right now, the last thing I want to do is sue anybody when I've never done that before. And right now I just want to get better. So I've been playing video games. I've been eating meals. I've been trying to go for walks. Before I was admitted into the hospital on February 20th, the weather was like -10. And lately, the weather's been like 8 degrees, which is why I'm recording outside and I'm just in a sweater. Admittedly, my fingers are a little cold, so I'm probably going to finish recording very soon and make my way back inside. The last little fun fact that I will give is that for the rest of my life, I believe it was an 8% chance that my lung will collapse again. On the bright side, I've got a 92% chance that this will never happen again. So after my unlucky 1 in 10,000, I'm hoping that we're swinging to the 92% and just staying like that. Because, man, at no point did I ever feel scared or angry, at life. I just felt inconvenienced, which I think very much matches my mentality when people have asked me, like, when I've told people, like, if I died, like, that'd be inconvenient. That is my only thought. Like, damn, that would suck if I died, which is also what my buddy Len said. If I died, because I am the owner of my Discord server and dying is a bannable offense. So I don't really know. We don't really have a procedure for that. I don't know if Discord can ban an owner on behalf of somebody else if they died. We'll get there when we get there. Hopefully not anytime soon. I hope this video was informative. I hope this video doesn't scare anybody. Unless you smoke every day. Yeah, you should be scared. Freaking stop smoking. Like, at least, if you're addicted to nicotine, like, what is it? Take a nicotine gum, right? Zyn. That's what the Americans are going on about, right? Take one of those. I don't know. I've never had nicotine before. If you're into weed, take an edible. I don't know. I'm not really too much into the whole weed sphere. But like, just there's no reason to smoke. If you vape, that's just an L. Stop vaping. Just don't do it. I don't see what the problem is. L. Bozo. Take up a normal, more socially acceptable addiction like alcohol, right? That is a joke. Don't get addicted to alcohol. Doesn't affect your lungs, but don't do it. And lastly, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everybody who sent their support to me. If you are just finding out about this through this video, don't feel bad that you didn't know about this. I kind of kept this very much under the radar. And when I posted my follow-up tweet about how the election police found me and beat me up was the implied sort of tone I was going for, that was actually a very serious tweet. That was me. I was in the hospital because I wasn't doing too good. So don't feel bad if you didn't know about it. I didn't really tell many people outside of like my Discord server and then like my friend groups. I guess one final, very, very final note. I am a Canadian, and as a Canadian citizen, that means that I have provincial health care. And out of this entire experience, my medical bills have come out to $45. $45 Canadian. And that $45 bill isn't because of the operation, which I've had 3, by the way. It's not because they fed me 3 meals a day for 2 weeks and a half. It's not because they housed me for 2 weeks and a half. It's not for all of the medication they gave me. It is because I had to call an ambulance for them to take me back to the hospital, in which I shouldn't have even been discharged, apparently. The point being, though, I am extremely fortunate that I live in a country where I am not medically bankrupt because of this entire situation. And for that reason, I think most oftentimes when there's a video like this, people expect some sort of GoFundMe in the description or a PayPal link to donate. I don't have any of that to share. I don't need any of y'all's money. And I will continue to advocate as a now very important moment in my life, the importance of accessible healthcare, and that publicly funded healthcare should be available and well maintained for everyone. Up here in Ontario, we just voted for the Conservative government once again for their 3rd term, who had nothing about maintaining public health care and all about funding private health care. Not a big fan of that, not to get too political, but man, not a fan of that. And obviously I empathize heavily with the Americans down south that have it even worse than I do. We deserve health care. It's a right. Otherwise, I mean, yeah, it sucked waiting for 2 weeks, but at least I lived. Can't say the same about many others. Anyways, take care of your lungs. And I don't know when my next video will be. I gotta kind of figure that out. In time, though. In time. Alright. This video is long enough. I'm sorry that I speak much slower because of my current condition. But hopefully I'll get back to normal soon. Bye. I'm old. People are gonna call me old in the chat. No.